Okay, we're going to take a look. Chanukah tonight. As we all know, it's Chanukah, second night of Chanukah tonight. And we're going to look at a little bit about Chanukah and the famous question of the Beis Yosef. We'll look at it inside, we'll see the words, but in a broader sense as well. What do we celebrate on Chanukah? What's the most important aspect of the celebration of Chanukah? So the Rambam defines, as we know, first of all, there is a contradiction. Not a contradiction as much as what we say in Alanisim and what we do when we speak about celebrating it are two different things. Because when we look in Alanisim, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating the victory in battle. The Raftis, Rivam, Dantis, Nidinam, Masar to Gibarim, Biyad Chaloshim, you gave the mighty in the hands of the weak, etc. It's all about the victories of the battle against the Hellenists. And then when the Gemara speaks about it, and the Gemara tells us the story of Mai Chanukah, it tells us about the miracles that took place with the Shemen in the Beis Hamikdash. And there's much written about why the Gemara and the Rabbanim didn't seem to take Chanukah to heart. Why is there no Masechtas Chanukah? There's a Masechtas Purim. Why is there no Masechtas Chanukah? Chanukah is mentioned, I think, 2-3 times in the entire Mishnah. Both of them in a by-the-way manner. If your camel is passing by loaded with flax and gets burnt and causes a conflagration because of getting lit, being set alight by the Chanukah menorah and the one Gemara. And then we have in Shabbos that it tells us that Ner Shabbos and Ner Chanukah, that we say that Ner Shabbos is out if it's more important. That's all we have about Chanukah in the main. We don't have any other issues associated with it. So why is it that is the case? And we'll try and understand the idea of Chanukah at a deeper level. But let's take a look at what the Rambam writes. B'bayis Sheni. This is how he begins in the Hilchas Chanukah, what you have over here. B'bayis Sheni k'v'shemolchu yavan gazer g'zeiris al Yisrael. During the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, when Yavan ruled, let's just define Yavan. Everybody translates it as Greeks. It's not necessarily the Greeks. After Alexander died and his empire was split amongst his various generals, the major empires that evolved from there were the Seleucid Empire, which included Persia, Syria, and Israel as part of it as well. And the other major general who carved out an empire was Ptolemy, who became the ruler of Egypt and made himself essentially the Pharaoh of Egypt. Those were the two major empires that were developed out of Alexander's. And the major point of contact between these two empires, if you consider the geography, is of course Eretz Yisrael. And so we were stuck between these two empires, and Baruch Hashem, though we managed to a certain extent to work it through. So the Seleucid Empire was beginning to feel the pressure of the Parthians in the east and the Romans in the west, and was finding it difficult. And Antiochus Epiphanes, one of the Seleucid emperors, decided to figure out how is he going to go about making sure to unite his empire. And he recognized that his empire was made up of all disparate kinds of people, and they all worshipped gods differently. And he decided that he would actually follow in Alexander's footsteps. Alexander attempted to unite his empire with Hellenistic ideals, with the values of Hellenism. And comes along Antiochus Epiphanes and wants to once again impose a unity on his empire, most specifically through causing and creating a unity of purpose, of culture, of worship. And one of the ways that you need to create a unified empire, is by suppressing all kinds of alternative ideas. You know, they wanted to impose British values on everybody in his empire. From his practical system, it was Hellenistic values. He was civilized and everybody else were barbarians. His values were the ones that count. And yes, I'm making a political statement as we say this. But nevertheless, that's how he decided. So even though we say over here that Gazru Gzeiris al Yisrael, while there was without doubt an element of it, in fact, we now know that his decrees were not only on the Jews, but his decrees were on all the minority groups that were under his suzerainty. I think that's the word. Not sovereignty, suzerainty. Nice English word, Suzreinty. I think that's how you spell it. Overlordship.
It's American.
No, it's an English word. It's his overlordship. But he goes. But he becomes one of our star hated people in our history. And as the Rambam writes, we looked at it. It was Geizik Zeris Al Yisrael Ubitlu Dosam, and he did what he could in order to be mevatel, in order to negate our faith. And he did not allow them at that time to involve themselves in Torah mitzvahs. And they put out their hands in our money, and in their women, and they went into the Beis Hamikdash, and they made holes in the walls, and they went about and made impure, they defiled all that was pure there, and the Bnei Yisrael were in great difficulty because of them. And he put great pressure on Jews in Judaism in maintaining our identity. Until the God of our forefathers had mercy on us, and saved us from their hands, and saved them, and the children of Chashmonai, the Kahanim Magdalim, were successful. Gavru overcame them, Vahorgum, and killed them, Vaishia Yisrael Miyodam, and saved the Jews from their hands. Now, I would point out something a little bit interesting over here. While it's true, and we know from the book of the Maccabees, that the aristocratic class who had very much assimilated into the ideals of Hellenism, and they were the powerful class, and they were attempting to impose their ideas. It was mostly a civil war, notwithstanding their ability to call upon Antiochus to send armies to support them. But it was mostly a civil war. And they appointed a king from the Kahanim. The Chosr Malchus Yisrael Yisrael Masayim Shana Adachur Ben Hasheni, and Malchus, kingship, returned to the Jewish people for more than 200 years until the second destruction. Now, this line of the Rambam demands a huge amount of explanation. He says, "V'midu melech mina kahanim v'chazra malchus liyisrael." They appointed a king from the Kahanim, and the kingship returned to the Jewish people. Number one, was it a good thing that they appointed a king from the Kahanim? Was this is what Malchus was meant to be, or Malchus was meant to, or who was meant to be Melech? No? Obviously not. Because Lo Yoshu Shevet Mi Yisrael V'choikim Mi Bein Maglav, the Mi Yehuda, Lo Yoshu Shevet Mi Yehuda V'choikim Mi Bein Maglav, we're supposed to appoint a king only from Yehuda were not meant to appoint a king from the Kohanim. And in fact, there are those amongst Chazal who say that their Malchus did not last. The Malchus of the Hashmonaim did not last very long. Why? And in fact, they were overthrown by Antipater, who was a Edomian from Edom, Edomian slave from the household to the household of the Maccabees. And then after his Antipater was killed or died, he was succeeded by his son Herod, who then went about and killed many Jews and was certainly a psychopath of some sort. Killed his own family. It was, however you look at it, he was not a healthy individual. Even though he built great works in Eretz Yisrael. But nevertheless, the fact is that Herod was not a great guy, and it's difficult to say that during the rule of Herod, that there was Chazra Malchus Yisrael, that there was a kingship that was assigned to the Jewish people. And we know that further on, and soon after Herod, so then what happens? The Romans themselves come in and they begin rule directly, and they impose their own councils who ruled Israel and taxed it. And how is it that the Rambam says Chazra Malchus Yisrael Yeser al Masayim Shana until the Churban Sheni? For at least 100 years before the Churban by Sheni, it was not Malchus Yisrael. They weren't ruled by Jews, either by Romans or by Herod and other non-Jews.
Malchus can mean sovereignty.
Pardon?
Does it mean sovereignty?
Well, difficult to know. What does the Rambam mean? Malchus Yisrael. The answer may be, if you take a look on how the Rambam here identifies what they did. I'm sorry, if you look at it slightly differently. If you take a look and you identify what the loss of sovereignty, the Rambam identifies happening because of Yovel. So the Rambam identifies the Gosuk Zeris al Yisrael, Bitlu Dasam, Leinicho Esam Lasek V'Terem Mitzvahs, Pashtu Yodam B'Mamaynim B'B'Naiseim, V'Nichnesu Laheichel U'Portzu B'Y Pirtzos V'Timo Ataras. If any of these things apply, then you're not sovereign. That's the definition of sovereignty for Jews. If all these things can apply, then we are sovereign. We're not looking at political sovereignty, we're looking at Jewish sovereignty. Jewish sovereignty is indeed defined by exactly these things: the ability to live a life of Torah and mitzvahs, being able to maintain our wealth and the tznius of our families, and being able to do the avoid and the beis hamikdash, b'tara. That is Jewish sovereignty. And so long as those things exist, irrespective of political sovereignty, it's considered a Malchus Yisrael. So, implication of today, that we may have political sovereignty, is it considered a Malchus Yisrael if we don't meet this definition of the Rambam? An interesting question. Without saying the politics, I'll let you figure it out for yourselves. Okay. So that's the Rambam, but once again, we need to think carefully about why the Rambam revolves the concept of sovereignty about rights to the Beis Hamikdash. We'll talk about it further later on this year. The Rambam continues, and when they managed to destroy their enemies, when they overcome their enemies and destroy them, this happened on the 25th of Kislev. They came into the Heichel on which day? According to this Rambam. Read it, on which day did they come into the Heichel?
25th.
On the 25th. Okay, think about it a minute. V'lo matzu shemetar b'migdash lepach echad. Lo hiyu bo lahadlik el yom echad bilvad. And they couldn't light it other than one day. V'dlikim imenu neiris ha'maracha shmoyne yomim. And they lit it. They managed to light the candles of the marach of the preparation of the menorah for 8 days. Until they squeezed out zaysim and they managed to get pure oil. Stop and consider. When was the first night of lighting? When was it the menorah first lit?
26.
That's right, on that night, on the night of the 26th. And so therefore, question, why do we begin celebrating on the 25th? Absolutely right. Let's stop and think about it. Not everybody agrees with this. There are those who understand that they defeated them and they first lit the menorah on the 25th, which seems to be reflected in our practice. But nevertheless, if you look simply at the words of the Rambam, it's not that simple. So we continue. Because of this, we begin it on the 25th, and obviously the Rambam is spelling it out because according to what he said a moment ago, superficially it shouldn't start on the 25th of Kislev, it should start on the 26th of Kislev. Nevertheless, we start on the 25th of Kislev, and we make them Yemei Simcha, V'Halel, Umadlikim Ba'aneris, Be'erev, Al Pischi Abatim, B'Cholayla, V'Layla Mishmanis Haleilois, and starting on the 25th, are days of Mishnah and Simcha, days of Simcha, doesn't say Mishnah, days of Simcha and Halal and thanks, and we light the Neiris in the evening at the entrance to the houses every night of the second night to be, because of Parsume Nisa, to express and to reveal the miracle. Yom Elu Heinanikrem. Chanukah, these days are called Chanukah. Ben Hasurim behesped v'tainis k'mei Purim. We're not allowed to make any hesped and tainis on them like Purim. Vadlokas aneris be'mitzvah midivrei seifrim kikriyas ha-megillah, and lighting the candles on them is a mitzvah midrabanan, just like reading the Megillah is on Purim. Okay. So this is the Rambam, a number of questions, a number of issues that we've raised. Let's put them aside for the moment. We'll come back and try to answer some of them in a few moments. Very famous question of the Beis Yosef. What do we know? What's the question of the Beis Yosef? No. How many nights did the candles, how many days did the candles burn? How many days did they burn? Pardon? They burned for 8 days. Yeah. It's just, pardon? Yeah, so they burned for 8 days. But there was sufficient oil for 1 day. That being the case, how many days was the miracle? 7 days was the miracle. Says the Beis Yosef. We have over here the Beis Yosef. V'atam shehutzuchu lahadlik shmoni yomim ha'isapach neishikol Yisrael hoyu becheskes temei meisim v'yevshel haskin shementor ad sheyavra aleim shiviyomim yom tumasam. And the reason why it was necessary for the candles to burn for 8 days from that single jug of oil was because all the Bnei Yisrael were Tmei Mesim. They couldn't arrange for pure oil until 7 days had passed that they were able to remove themselves from the Tumah, and there was one additional day for the Kshitishas Ha'ezeisim for squeezing the oil. V'tiknum loitzimem shemen tar, and they did so to get pure oil. V'ran kosev shahayalem shemen tar rachakar b'yom v'ushman yom ben alich v'chazara. The Ran says no, there were people who were tar, but you needed time of travel to. Anybody know where was it that they got the oil from? Where is it that the Tekoa was considered a place of oil? Okay, so that's where they would go. So then, the Ikalamedik asks the Beis Yosef his very famous question. I will point out that my father-in-law points out to me that he doesn't understand this Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef is in fact copied nearly word from word from a Tosfos Harash on Shabbos. Beis Yosef says this over, doesn't say a word about it coming from the Tosfos Harash. Tosfos Harash predates the Beis Yosef by several hundred years, by 300 years. It's very strange. Fine.
Did he count the question himself? Why would
Pardon?
you count some other-
Again,
If he had the question himself, why would you then describe
it's
it?
nearly word for word. Okay?
That's a share for another time.
That is a share for
Rabbinic
another time.
plagiarism.
Vehicle and vehicle and we can check out. Lama kavush mani yamim. Why did they fix it for 8 days? The kevin the shemin shebepach hoisbei kedei lahadik la'achas. There was sufficient oil to burn for one night. Works out that the nest was only for 7 nights. So the Beis Yosef brings down a number of answers. I'm going to try and understand these answers. We'll try and see what's a couple of problems with them. They took the oil of the pach and of its jug, and they split it into 8 parts. And every night they would put an eighth of what was sufficient to light in the menorah. Nevertheless, it lasted until the morning. It comes out that every night there was a miracle done. Okay, one answer, the Beis Yosef. A second potential answer. That after they put the oil into the neiris of menorah properly, nishra apach moleki betchila. The jug, not the pach. Yeah, he says the pach remained full as it was earlier. V'nikra nesaf b'layla rishon. And so even the first night, the miracle was recognized. What's the problem with this answer? The first answer is indeed there were 8 nights of miracles. What's the problem with this answer? Figure it out. No?
They didn't know what was going to happen.
No. They saw they still had oil there. Remember, what's the question? The miracle was how many days was the question? The miracle was 7 days. And the 8th day, what do we have the extra days? Now figure it out.
That's the last day.
So the last day, so every night, the pach remained full. So the last day,
Burned out.
the pach, it's the jug that they were pouring
Was
from.
empty.
People think it's the oil and the menorah remained. Some people say that. It's not what the Beis Yosef says. The Beis Yosef says that the pach, the jug, remained full. Okay? That the pach remained full as originally. But the problem is then, there's no miracle on the 8th day. Inami, or a third answer, that they put the oil in in on the first day. They put all the oil in v'dolku kol halayla, and they burnt the whole night. Matzu haneris mleim shemen, and the morning they found the candles full of oil. Once again, the question that we asked a moment ago. Here he's saying the miracle was not in the oil in the pach, in the jug, but the miracle was in the oil that it remained in the candelabra. What's the miracle? So again, how many days of miracle do they have based on this? Once again, 7. The last day was not a night of miracle. Okay. Now, I have in the past wanted to say the difference between these 3 answers, or between essentially these 2 answers. The difference between them is, when do you say indeed the miracle began? When did they come in to start and light the candles? According to according to, if the last day was not the miracle, so then they began lighting it on the 25th. And that was when they began lighting in the Beis Hamikdash. If you say that the first day was not a miracle, as it's implied in the, or each day was a miracle, okay, so then it's not necessarily the case. But a number of questions to have on this, on these answers of the Beis Yosef. First of all, one question, and the time is really getting short. I didn't even realize time is really getting short. We'll move along quickly. One question on the Beis Yosef. These miracles, do we have any history of miracles like this from our past, before Chanukah? We make a great thing of these miracles. But were they such great miracles? No? Where do we find similar miracles that we don't commemorate?
The clouds?
No. Oil. Lights burning a long time. Let's take a look. Let's take a look in Parshas, let's see, Chayei Sarah. We take a look in Parshas Chayei Sarah. Perik Chof Dalid, Posach Samach Zayin, page 120 in the Art Scroll Chumashim. Okay, so Vayivya Yitzchak Ha'olah Sarah Imai, and Yitzchak brought Rivka to the tent of Sarah his mother. V'yikach es Rivka, he took Rivka Vatila Liisha, she became his wife. Vayehoveho, and he loved her. Vayinochem Yitzchak achrei imoi, and Yitzchak was comforted after his mother. And very strange construct over here that Rashi attempts to look at and understand. So if we take a look at Rashi, first column, middle of the column, Posik Samach Zayin, beginning of the line, Ha'olah Sarah Imam. So he reads it like this: he brought her to the tent. Sarah Ima. She was just like Sarah, his mother, Klamar, meaning to say, V'naasis dugmas Sarah Ima. It became the very image of Sarah, his mother. Classic example of somebody marrying somebody who, like his mother. But we'll worry about that. Shekol's man shesara kayemes hayaner daluk me'er Shabbos. So long as Sarah was alive, she would light the candles every Friday night, and they burned for 7 days. Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, and we consider that a special miracle. So here you have the exact miracle of Chanukah happening on a weekly basis, and we have no commemoration of it. We've got a mention of it here in over here in, pardon? Well, we have, whoever teaches the kids, a little bit in the cheder, but we make no tumult on it. We don't do Shabbos candles in commemoration of those. We do Shabbos candles because we have to do Shabbos candles. And that's why she had to do Shabbos candles. So we got to understand what's unusual about the miracle of Chanukah. So if you say the miracle was in the oil, in the candelabrum, like the last answer of the Beis Yosef. And if the miracle is in the pach, is in the jug of oil, no, where did that happen? Where was there a miracle in a jug of oil? Anyone? Melachim Beis.
Elisha.
Elisha, very, very good. Elisha tells the lady, go ahead and pour oil. And she pours and pours and pours and pours. And the jug doesn't get empty until she stops pouring. So we have miracles in jugs of oil. Does anybody commemorate this? You can't even remember it barely.
Oh, so here's just a hiddur mitzvah, isn't it?
Pardon?
Here's just a hiddur mitzvah.
What's a hiddur mitzvah?
The lighting they did
The way that
so we're celebrating a miracle, the miracle that they're able to do a chumrah.
I don't know if they were able to do a chumrah in the sense they
They
could have, they didn't need to use oil that was tar. There's a number of questions in that, but we'll put that aside for the moment. Okay, so what I want to give is a different kind of answer, and perhaps we can understand in a chiddishtik manner what the miracle of Chanukah actually was. What was the miracle of the oil? Because there are a number of additional questions that need to be considered. From the first answer of the Beis Yosef, the problem is that when you light the menorah, you're supposed to fill it entirely. What the Beis Yosef says is that they put in only an eighth of the oil in the first night, and then eighth every night. That means they did 8 times a mistake. Because in truth, you're supposed to always only light the menorah when it's full. And probably it would have made sense halachically that they shouldn't have kept back an eighth unless they knew there was going to be a miracle whereupon it would have been full beforehand.
They didn't have halachas till afterwards.
No. Who? At the time of the Hashmonoyim? At the time of the Hashmonoyim, there were halachas.
Yeah, but no.
Not Hanukkah,
No. Yeah.
There weren't so many halachas at the time of Sarah. You're right, Sarah and Rivka. But I'm not looking at that. I'm just pointing out that the miracle is not such an awesome miracle. It happened on a regular basis earlier. But now looking back at the answers that the Beis Yosef gave, there are halachic difficulties with each one of his answers. Number one, if we say that he put in an eighth, there's a halachic difficulty that he should have had it full. If you say the miracle was that miraculously there was new oil, then the problem is you're only supposed to light the candles in the Beis Hamikdash on regular natural oil, not on miraculously produced oil. So how can you actually have both these things at the same time? In other words, whichever way you look at it, you have a problem. If you take a look and think deeper about all the various answers, and time's too short to give any of the additional answers given, if you think deeply about them, they split into 2 groups. Either there was a miracle in the quality of the oil, so oil that previously would only have burnt for an eighth of the night, burnt the entire night, as per the first answer. So there was a miracle in the quality. It had much more calorific or energy built into the oil that they were able to extract over a longer time. So there's a miracle in the eichus of the oil, or there's a miracle in the kamus of the oil, in the quantity of oil. The quantity, the second 2 tirutzim of the Beis Yosef both discuss a miracle in the quantity. Again, to reflect back, if we say the miracle is in the eichus of the oil, and therefore there was not a full quantity of oil that was left in the menorah, so then we have a problem that they didn't fulfill the mitzvah every time that they lit it when it should have been a full amount. If you say the miracle is in the quantity rather than just the quality, we have the problem that you're having Shemin Nisi. However, says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, there's another answer and understanding of the miracle that you can put, which is reflective of the miracles of the Beis Hamikdash. If you take a look, towards the bottom of the page. So it says the Gemara in Yuma, the following is a tradition that we have from our forefathers, and that is that Mokim Oren Eina Min Amida, that the place that the Oren occupied was immeasurable, was not within the concept of measure. Says the Rashi on it. What does it mean that Malkum Oren Eina Min Amida? Eina Teifis Mat Memidis HaChalal Shel Bayis Klum. It didn't occupy any space to lessen the amount of space that was in the Beis Hamikdash, the Tanya. Okay, as we learned in the Brisa, and he explains, the Oren Sha'asa Moshe yesh lo 10 amis avir l'chol ruach kisheniten be'emsa beis hakaporos. The Oren that Moshe made had 10 amis space on each side of it when it was placed in middle of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, middle of the Beis HaKaporos. Okay. Now, how big was the Beis HaKaporos?
Less than that.
How big was the Beis HaKaporos? It was 20 amas by 20 amas. Quite explicit. It was 20 amas by 20 amas. You put the Oren in middle. So, how big is the Oren? 1.5 by 2.5. Quite explicit. Psukim. We have it, explicit psukim. That was the size of the Oren. That means if I put it down in middle, how much space do I have on each side of it? No? Let's say there's about 9.5, depending which. But, says the Brisa, you measured it, it was 10. So the Mokim Ha'orim Eina Min Amida. This is what Chazal is saying. The place of the Oren, at the same time that while it took up measurable space, at the same time, it didn't take up any measurable space. Two opposites coexisted at that exact moment in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay?
Is that where we get then however many people came, there was enough room?
Okay, lots of things associated with the Beis Hamikdash retain this idea of nimna hanim noise, that there are two opposites that sustain themselves at the exact same time in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, where do we have a miracle of burning where two opposites sustain themselves? We have in our history, and again, as soon as I tell you, you'll kick yourself, because of course I know that.
Eliyahu.
No?
Yeah, we haven't got those cans to burn.
Pardon?
Yeah.
You got the waterlogged.
Yeah, so he got that burning. Okay. But it wasn't that there were two things. So he managed to get a waterlogged. There were huge amounts of heat were created. There was fire came down from heaven. But you, no, there's a much. Go on.
The bush.
Oh, very good. Take a look at the third up. Says Shmos Rabbah, V'yar v'nei asneh boyer be'esh, and he looks and he sees the sneh is full of fire. Mikan amru ha'eshel ma'ala levluvin v'serefes ve'ena cheles. From here we know that the fire from above brings flames. It burns and doesn't consume ve'ena cheles. V'hi shchayretz black ha'eshel mata ena ma'ala levluvin. Okay, whatever. The underlying idea is that it's possible to have a nimna hamnim noise. You can have a fire, you can have it burning, and while it's burning, and while that item is burning, that doesn't consume the fuel that is meant to be burned. Chazal say, Misha'omer l'shemen liyad yomer l'choymitz liyad. That just like as God says oil burns, he could go and sell vinegar to burn. And so says the Lubavitcher Rebbe that the miracle of the oil of Chanukah was different to the miracle of any other oil or the miracle of any other light that existed. Two things were happening at the same time. It was burning the oil and consuming the oil, but the oil wasn't being destroyed. The oil wasn't being consumed, destroyed. It was burning the oil, but it wasn't consumed. Something that is impossible for us to grasp. It's nimna'am nimno. It's just like the oil, the mokum ha'aron is measurable, but it doesn't take up any space. So too over here, the oil is consumed, but it does, and the oil is burning, but it isn't consumed. It isn't destroyed. Now, it doesn't answer to us the question of what happened on the 8th day, but it does answer the other questions. It's not miraculous oil, because the miracle wasn't in the quality or the quantity of the oil. The oil was the exact same thing. The miracle was in the fire, that it was a fire that burnt the fuel of the oil, but didn't consume it. That's a miracle that we didn't have. The only similar miracle is the miracle of the snah. It's not exactly the same. We don't have time to go in exactly, but underlying it is a concept that is similar, and that removes a number of the questions. It's not nisi. It was full every time they lit it. However, it doesn't answer the question that we began with, which is, what about the 8th day? At the 8th day, what do we celebrate? We come on to the other answers. We celebrate the miracle. We celebrate the continuum of the fact that we were able to remain sovereign and bring korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash. May we indeed become sovereign in Yerushalayim and bring korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash. The
8th day was like an Isruchah.
The 8th day was not simply an Isruchah, but it was a day takit to celebrate the victory. Or it could be that the first day was to celebrate the victory, dependent if I say that they first lit it on the 25th, or meaning that the battle and the victory was on the 24th, and they entered in and they were able to light on the 25th, or if I say, as the Rambam did, that they lit it on the 25th, the question is then, which day is the day of the miracle?
Very clever.
Pardon?
Very clever.
It is very clever. It's very good. Okay. You got that? Good.
Okay, go on.
Very good. Pleasure.
So was there an Indian of having a different menorah, the one people celebrate Chanukah with?
Pardon?
Is there an issue with replicating the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash?
By whom?
Because
By people.